Hey guys, what's up? It's your questioning queen here, Beverly. Today I have a great episode for you. It's with Leslie Draffin. She is a woman's somatic coach, a psychedelic microdosing guide, and a womb mystic. Now, when I tell you we get into it, y'all, we get into it. This is actually more of one of my explicit podcasts because we are talking about womb healing. We're talking about menstrual cycle. We're talking about sensuality, sexuality, STDs. Yeah. So things that we don't normally talk about, but maybe as a society we should. I've had a previous episode about microdosing, and it seems like people really were interested about that episode. It's definitely eye-opening and very interesting. So I hope you tune in, slide into my DMs or on my Instagram and let me know what you think. Enjoy. Okay, let's get real. Do you sometimes feel like life's just a never-ending loop of wake up, drink coffee, go to work, waste countless hours scrolling online, eat, watch TV, maybe read a book, sleep, and then repeat? Have you ever really thought, is this really it? Guess what? You're not the only one. I help people just like you, well, and me, to get unstuck. I'm bringing on amazing guests who will inspire you, challenge you, and maybe even blow your mind. Let's face it, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you got. But lucky for you, I know exactly how to help. With a little bit of woo and a whole lot of you, it's time to unstick your stuck and shake that thing up. Let's do this on Beverly Explains It All. Hey guys, welcome to Beverly Explains It All. Today I have the wonderful Leslie Draffin. Leslie is a woman's somatic coach, a psychedelic microdosing guide, and a womb mystic. Hi, Leslie.
Hi, Beverly. Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy that you're here. We have so much to get into. I love to start off with I like to play with my guests like a little 3-question icebreaker game. Are you into it?
Of course. Heck yeah, I'm into it.
Awesome. All right. So, my first question for you is, have you ever felt like you were doing everything right, but still felt stuck?
Yes, that's literally why I do what I do.
Boom. There you go. Because, my show is all about basically helping people get unstuck in life, find out their passion so they can ultimately live their best life. So,
Yeah.
I always like to hear, what people do when they are trying to get unstuck. So, we're going to jump
Mhm.
more into that. But I have a second question for you. And it is, do you believe that our bodies hold on to emotional or spiritual trauma?
100%. Yes, I think most of it lives in the body, and the brain is just the interpreter of the things in the body.
I like the way you said that. That's like a thinker for me for a second because I'm like, it's so true and it comes out this way.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. Have you ever started doing breath work and just ended up falling asleep?
Oh gosh, yes, 100%. I think it was holotropic breath work online during the pandemic, trying it for the first time, and I fell dead asleep. It was like a 90-minute thing. It was like a group thing. And I woke up. I was like, was that it? Yes, 100%.
Oh my God. I love it. I'm pretty new to breath work, somatic breath work, but it really speaks to me because I feel
Mhm.
like I really get to that next level. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like I'm in a trance and I'm just like, wow. And I do feel so relaxed. Sometimes I think I'm sleeping, but I'm not quite
Yep.
sure because
Mhm.
I'm like, you're not really conscious. It's hard to explain. Like you're just like in that kind of trance state, you
Yes.
know? But it's so relaxed and it's just awesome.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of those breathwork practices can get you into that like theta brainwave state where you're not sure if you're awake or asleep. And that's probably what your body needed.
I love it. And I definitely want to talk more about that later. But first, can you please tell my listeners a little bit about yourself?
For sure. So, my name is Leslie Draffin, and in a former life, I was a TV news anchor for 15 years. Now, as Beverly said, I'm a women's somatic coach, a psychedelic microdosing guide, and womb mystic. And I did really come to this work after spending about 20 years numbing out, punishing myself, deeply disconnecting through things like eating disorders and alcohol abuse because unknowing to me at that point, I had a really deep wound around unworthiness. I felt like I did not deserve love. And that wound got even worse because at 18, I was diagnosed with herpes. And I'm from the deep south of the United States. My dad's a preacher. So this really sent me into a huge shame spiral that over time really saw me getting more addicted to hustling, trying to prove to people that I was
Mm,
worthy. And so from the outside looking in, I looked like I had it all. I was a six-figure news anchor on an evening show, but internally I was falling apart. I was
mm.
coping with alcohol, I was depressed, I was anxious, I was burnt out, I was starving myself. And so finally, after years in therapy and medications and thousands of dollars spent on these spiritual modalities, something really clicked for me when I started to combine psychedelic microdoses with somatic practices and reconnecting to my womb and healing my sexual shame. And so I have come out from that dark night into this space where, yes, just like you said, I help people, women specifically, connect with their bodies to heal wounds around worthiness, to heal sexual shame and trauma, and to really move things out of their body so they can create the life that they deeply crave.
Wow, it's so powerful. Just a few things that hit me. I mean, first of all, you're from the Bible Belt, so
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what was it like growing up there and, having a preacher as a father? Like, my dad was a deacon in the church, and, my dad was also a brigadier general. Everyone thought
Oof.
of him like being super strict and things like that. But for me, he was just daddy. But,
Yeah.
I know the South does not play. My family's from the South too. What was it like just growing up in the South and having a father who was a preacher and
You
being who
know,
you are?
yeah, right. Well, the me that I am now has really only been about 5 or 6 years in the present, right? This authentic expression. But growing up in the South, growing up as a preacher's daughter, I think, and now it's like hindsight 2020. There
Mm,
was always this idea of you living in a fishbowl, of people always watching your every move. And so you needed to act a certain way always.
mhm,
And that was something that I remembered my mom talking to me about. And I remember her struggling with too. I remember her really struggling to have strong female friendships. And I think it was because she felt this judgment, whether it was real or imagined. And so that was really passed on to me in a lot of ways. I was a good little Christian soldier. I
mm.
was, God, so narrow minded. Like, seriously,
Wow.
hella fucking cringe.
Would
But
we have been friends?
probably. I
Okay.
mean, maybe depends. I don't know. Were you like, I don't know. Life was for me is very black and white, like right and wrong at that point, and it was very much like church multiple times a week. And yet, there was always this like inner hint of like, where are the women? Like,
Mm,
where are the women? Like, why does this not feel quite right to not see myself in this faith, in this church? Like we only recently started to let women be deacons and elders in our churches. Certainly
mm.
cannot be preachers. And so it was just always this like little, and I was always kind of obsessed with Mary Magdalene. I thought like this horror thing was so fascinating. Yeah, and so that's kind of what it was like growing up. I was deeply and I'm also adopted. So, like, you throw that into the mix, right? Where you've
You
got all
mentioned
this.
that.
Yep. So, the additional layer of being adopted, I think, unknowingly, subconsciously left me with this feeling that I had to prove myself in order to be worthy of love. And I
Mm.
never wanted to mess up. I felt like if I did mess up, they would like toss me back. Not that my parents would have
Mm.
ever done that, but like I think there's two types of adopted kids. It's either be so perfect they never want to give you up, or F you, you're not my real parents. That was my sister. She was that. She was the second. I was the first. I was like, let me be perfect, get straight A's. And so that plus this idea of having to live in a fishbowl disconnected me from my authentic self. And it took me a really long time into my 30s to figure out what it is that I really liked, what it is that I really believed. And so that's kind of what it was like growing up in the deep South as an adoptive preacher kid.
So obviously not easy at
No.
all. Gosh, I can't even imagine. I mean, jumping forward, you were so incredibly successful on the outside, but you were really struggling on the
Yeah.
inside. What was that moment that you realized that something had to change and that you had to get unstuck?
Fortunately for me, I had my spiritual awakening in 2019 and I really started to do things like meditate and use breath work to experience more from life and connect to something more expansive. Then the pandemic hit. And
Mm,
so I always say like thank goddess I had at least a year of really diving into additional mindfulness practices because the pandemic was rough. I was the essential anchor. I was the one that needed to come to work. I was the dependable one. Everyone
ugh,
else got to sit their asses at home. And
yeah.
so I was
No.
unknowingly just getting so much more secondary trauma from the things I was having to experience. The people who would call terrified, most of them were elderly.
Yeah.
And so for me, enough was enough really came in early 2022. I got sick with a respiratory infection for like 3 months. I thought it was COVID, never tested positive for COVID. And around this time, my husband also says like he saw the light just like go out of my eyes. Like I didn't want to go to work. It was just such
Oh,
a
wow.
struggle. And finally, I was making these moves to take a sabbatical behind the scenes. I had a psychiatrist and I had my primary care and my therapist. But we had this really terrible school shooting about 2 hours from where I live, this elementary school, Uvalde Elementary, where someone
Mm,
came and murdered a bunch of children who were little babies.
yeah.
And I was
Oh,
solo
just give me
anchoring.
chills.
Yeah, I was solo anchoring the evening shift that week. And at this point, I'd already been microdosing. I'd already been working with all these other modalities, and I just cried. I was reading what they wanted to be when they grew up and their favorite colors and how their personalities were, and I just cried in the middle of the A block of the newscast. I finally
Oh,
make it to the commercial break. And my producer is like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" I was like, "No, I'm not okay. This is fucked up. Like, I can't believe we're doing this. Like, this is just too much." And about a week later, I was like, "I gotta take a break." I took a 3-month leave of absence and I never went
wow.
back.
Wow. You're like,
Yeah,
done.
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 Yeah,
I mean, it was
yeah,
just for your soul, right?
yeah. And I think what had happened is because at that point I'd been microdosing for about 3 months with a wonderful guy named Bijou. The walls that I had built around my heart and around my soul for all of that 15-year career that was necessary for me to do the job I was doing and not be so detached started to crumble. And
Wow.
so that plus the fact that I was becoming so aware of these negative coping mechanisms like drinking, I think I really just fell apart to fall back together.
I get that. I'm like a strong believer of that statement right there. And I have my little questions here all written all nice and neat, but I'm just going off script because just listening to your story, it feels so relatable for women who are just overwhelmed, especially during that pandemic time where it was just a
Right.
time of crazy. Like I work in Hollywood, so I was a writer's assistant at the time. So I was lucky, even though I didn't feel very lucky, like I got to work from home in my safe little, COVID-free bubble.
Yeah.
So I never really, of course you think about like the first responders and people like that, but you don't really think about the newscasters and people
Mhm.
who do everyday jobs who still have to do them or still had
Yeah.
to do them at the time and the effects that it really had on them.
Mhm.
So I'm just wondering, because you did mention, and obviously that's going to be the bulk of our podcast, you were already microdosing at the time.
Yeah.
I want to know if you can just walk me through how you discovered microdosing. One of my questions was already about your somatic coaching and breath work,
Mhm.
but how did you come from, Southern living, in the South with the preacher father? You can even walk me through the STD if you feel comfortable. How all that reaction was to, and now I am going to be a somatic coach and I'm jumping into microdosing because that is a journey of a
Yeah.
zigzag, you know?
Such a zigzag. Yeah. So to answer your first question, I heard about microdosing on a podcast. So if you're listening to
Mhm.
this podcast and you haven't heard about it before, or this is your deeper dive, welcome. And, I'd heard this woman, her name is Bijou, speak on a podcast, and she was specifically talking about how psychedelics can help with sexual shame and sexual trauma. And I immediately messaged her to come on my show. The second we hung up our interview, I was like, I have got to hire you. Like, I
Mhm.
have done all these other things. At this point, I'd been working with my womb, working with my menstrual cycle. I'd been in a therapist situation where we talked specifically about my sexual shame, but nothing was breaking through. I was so good at intellectualizing the trauma. I could tell you everything about the trauma, and yet I couldn't figure out why I wasn't able to move beyond it from a lived experience. Why it was still coming up for me, why I still felt like these like weird thoughts and I would hear these like voices from past lovers and this deep sense of shame around my being my fullest self.
Mm.
So I hired Bijou. We worked together for the beginning of 2022. And I had to do a lot of work in the beginning to process the bias that I had around drugs being bad and drugs being wrong. Because not only was I a preacher's daughter from the deep South, I was like a dare kid. I won
Mm.
a t-shirt decorating contest in third grade. I'd pay like $1 million to have that shirt right now. It would be such great marketing. It was like, your brain on drugs or whatever. And so I had to do a lot of that work. But for me, I've always been someone who deeply questions everything. And so the pandemic showed me we don't have a loving government. Like, there's a reason why they don't want you to eat mushrooms, and it's not because they're worried that you're gonna fall off of your roof. It's
Mm,
because they're worried you're gonna become ungovernable when you realize that, like, we're all the same. We're all from love. Like, you can't have war
mhm,
when we're all actually just connected. So, I really had to do a lot of that, and I mean, do I keep this from my family? If they wanna know about it, they know they can find it on the internet. But we don't really have those conversations about me, like, helping women heal womb and sexual trauma through somatic psychedelics. But I guess the zigzag is really, like, as the mushrooms were able to help me zoom out of my life and see why I am the way I am, I found that the clients I was working with at that point with their menstrual cycle and their womb continued to have this trauma come up and these things that were blocking them. And so I realized, okay, mushrooms helped me. They're definitely going to help these women. So I went and did a really long training and a trauma informed training to help bring that into my ecosystem of modalities too. But I guess what's really interesting is, microdosing and psychedelics in general, and just this work in general, helps you become really aware when you meet it intentionally. And so I think I just have always like been born into needing to do this work. Like I said, like there was a reason why I was fascinated with like the holy horror. There's a reason why, like I got honestly, like I don't think we I'm not that person who thinks you manifest all the things that happen to your life, good, bad, or whatever. But I
mm,
do think that me getting herpes was an absolutely important aspect of my journey because it sent me so much more into shame and so much more into disconnection that when I came out of that and began to heal that and speak openly about the herpes, I'm
mhm,
like, well, shit, I can live having slayed this shame and show these other
right.
people how to do the same thing as a preacher's daughter who also, not to trauma dump, who was born of rape. My birth mother was
Mm,
raped as a child. And so it's like all these layers
so
are
many.
really like this nuance of who I am. So the zigzag, I think, is just a course correction into what it
Right.
is that I was always supposed to be. I just
Yeah.
did it in a way that, was more mainstream. I think I'm here to help people question what it is that they truly want and to understand the world around them and internal world too. So I did that
Mm,
as a news anchor by shining a light on the world and the people that needed to be held accountable. And now it's like, we're going to hold you accountable and look at your
yeah.
shadows.
If you think of it, it's all connected, which it's really interesting to me because, like, as you said, it might have been some course correction, but I feel like life is zigzag. Like, that's
Yeah.
just the way life is. Everything, in a way, kind of happens for a reason, or everything happens to me the way it's just supposed to happen, you
If you look
know?
at it like that, yeah. That's such a growth mentality too. Like certainly you could be a victim and think everything's happening to me.
Right.
And I have just chosen to say everything's happening for me, even the
I love
shittiest
it.
things like divorce
Right.
and betrayal and STDs and all the things.
You know? I mean, I can't even imagine because I know just growing up, I went to a Baptist church in Maryland and I kind of, all the like the little kids were grouped together and you're kind of like the church's kids. Were you kind of like that? Were they like, well, she's the preacher's daughter, so she belongs to us. Like, did people
Mm.
at the church find out about the STD? How did your family react? Like, I'm just wondering how the shame set in because it's just so deep where it's like it's just something that's not talked about and we know that like shame is just something that so many women carry silently. So how did you just grow up dealing with it?
So I was a freshman in college. So I was away from home for the first time, and it happened a month after I had sex for the first time with this boyfriend I'd had for years. And yeah, so I think it's exactly what you said. No one wanted to talk about it. And therefore, my inner world made it so much more shameful. My
Yeah.
parents and my mom specifically is not good about talking about emotions. Like I remember when she would be upset as a child, she would just go into her room and cry and express her emotions privately. And it's like I never learned through witnessing how to process an emotion. And so we didn't talk about that. We didn't talk about.
Yeah.
And I also had just such an issue being able to speak about it. I remember I wrote them an email because they were going to
Oh,
see this test on their health insurance. I was like, well,
uh,
shit, I have to tell them. And it was like,
busted.
right. And I think it was just like maybe a phone call or an email. And she was, you know, we love you. And yet that was kind of it. Meanwhile, I'm at college, like on the verge of suicidal.
Oh
Like I
man.
just want to disappear. I'm like fantasizing about how I can like clean out my college fund, like turn off my cell phone, get a burner and bounce and never see a person again that I know. Like that was like this fantasy I had. And so
Mhm.
for me, that's the problem with shame It's
Mhm.
when we don't acknowledge it. This closet, this shame monster in your closet feels like a monster. And when I finally like ripped the band-aid off of my like herpes skeleton and posted publicly about it on the internet a year ago January, I
Mm.
realized that it was like a mouse. It wasn't actually a monster in the closet. It was I had created this story around it that was going to make me so unlovable. And I have a fabulous husband and a fabulous partner who accepts all parts of me, including that part. And it's like I know I wouldn't have been able to do that without his love and support,
Mm.
but ripping that band-aid off and sharing about that was so deeply freeing, and I did it for her. I did it for me as 18-year-old. I needed me. If
Mm.
I had had me when I got herpes at 18, bitch, I would have been life would have been so different,
Okay.
right? It would have been. And you know what's fascinating? The number of people who've come into my DMs and who have come into who I personally know who are
Mhm.
like, "Oh, I have herpes too." And the 18-year-old girls who just had sex for the first time and got herpes, who are, like, distraught. I'm like, "My love, it's gonna be okay."
You
I can
know?
tell you it is, and that's why I did it. So it's like when we pull shame out of the closet
Mm.
of secrecy, it's not shameful anymore.
And they say the truth will set you free, you
Yeah,
know?
there's a reason, yeah, they say that.
I'm just wondering, so your personal healing journey with, having an STD, and how did the psychedelics help reshape your relationship
Mm.
to self-worth and purpose?
I think because they help me see these facets and these parts of myself that I had been hiding, that had been operating subconsciously, these protector parts, these parts of myself that were building the wall around my heart, making me very cold and distant from people. And it helped me sort of zoom out. I like to say this analogy that's have you seen the movie The Hunger Games?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. In when everyone's in the arena and they zoom out and it's like the game makers above making everything happen,
Mm.
psychedelics help me zoom out to that game maker level and see how these little seemingly inconsequential events and dots were all deeply connected and why, you know, at the very root of it was this wound around not feeling lovable, a
Mm.
wound that was created from being in utero in a 12-year-old's womb who was kicked out of her house when her mom found out that she was pregnant, who was in such a deep state of stress and survival mode that that was implanted in my genes of living in a foster home for a month as a newborn. I'm not conscious aware of what was going on then, but that dishevelment, that disruption absolutely had some impact on my nervous system.
Of
And
course.
from that subconscious place, that unconscious place, I was operating from all of these other places. And so psychedelics helped me connect the dots and
Wow.
give myself a lot of compassion and kind of just be like, "Ah, that's why I am the way I am. That's hilarious."
Oh,
Hmm.
got it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Man, so I'm really intrigued by your work with menstrual cycles with microdosing. You created the cyclical microdosing method. Can you explain exactly what that is and how it can be a game changer in feeling more empowered and balanced through the month?
Yes. Oh, yes. So the menstrual cycle, if you aren't that familiar, is much more than just the days you have your bleed. It's really the day before, sorry, the first day of your bleed, all the way until the day before your next bleed. And so within that month or so period, you've got about 4 different phases. I like to talk about them as seasons. So
Mm.
inner spring is the week after your period when your energy rises and you're feeling pretty good. Inner summer is that short phase of ovulation when you are highly magnetic, potentially kind of turned on,
Mm.
and your strength, your magnetism are like at their peak. Inner fall is the PMS time of your luteal phase. It's the
Ugh.
longest period. And it's the one that gets the
Yeah.
bad rep,
Ugh.
right? Secretly, it's my favorite phase. And then there's inner winter when you bleed. And so when I started to learn about my menstrual cycle, which was in 2020 when I came off of the pill, I discovered that it really does govern everything about your life when you let it. It's going to govern
Mm.
everything about your life consciously or subconsciously. And it's, one thing that I really love to tell people to do is to start to align with it. Let it really guide your life. And what I mean by that is when you are feeling energetic, do things like learn new hobbies and be outward energy, right? Connect with your friends, volunteer, go out on dates. When you're feeling inner, which is that luteal phase, the inner fall, do things like organize your house, spend time alone, those types of things, right? The other thing that the menstrual cycle governs is a lot of bodily functions as well, like your metabolism, your brain capacity, your mood, your sexual desire. And so I'd been working with the menstrual cycle for several years before I started microdosing. And when I began microdosing, I had this like during a meditation. And in my journal, which I discovered about a year later, I'd written microdosing and menstrual cycle question mark. So it was like, oh, she was there. This idea was there. And what I realized is if your menstrual cycle impacts everything about your life, it's obviously going to impact your microdosing protocol too. But a protocol in microdosing is just a schedule of how often you microdose in a week. They were all created by men. Of course they were. So I discovered and I guess I hypothesized that if we ate microdoses in tune with our cycle, we could have better cycles, better connection to our feminine energy, and potentially better energy and mood all month long. So the cyclical microdosing method takes the 2 weeks you feel really good, spring and summer, and the 2 weeks you feel pretty bad, and you microdose differently in those two halves of the cycle. In the first half, when you've got generally good energy, good mood, you're going to microdose twice a week. And then in the second half, when you might be feeling more symptoms, you might be feeling more sluggish and more inward, right? That's the important part. You're feeling really inward. You're potentially better able to feel present because of the way that the brain has shifted and the way that progesterone is a very calming hormone. You
Mhm.
microdose up to 5 times a week. And so what I've seen that do is help with cramps as much as 60% less
Wow.
cramps, especially with women
Wow.
in endometriosis.
Yes.
And it's because there is some study out there that suggests that microdoses have an anti-inflammatory property. But I think it's because when we're more present, when we're slowing down, we're better able to care for ourselves in all these other ways. You're not rushing around like a chicken with your head cut off. And so you're making better choices all
Mm.
month long that can potentially benefit your pain. The other thing I'm noticing is it really does deeply connect us to the body in a new and interesting way because we're better able to pay attention to the sensations. Like maybe you're suddenly aware of irritation or a little bit of pain around ovulation, which is something that a lot of people experience, or you're suddenly able to realize the warning signs of like a massive mood swing. And so people that have completed the cyclical microdosing method, generally for 2 to 3 months, come back to me and say things like, my endometriosis symptoms, while they weren't necessarily a lot less, I was able to deal with them so much better than before. And I stopped seeing my womb as the enemy. I stopped seeing my period as this battleground and instead as this sign and this, kind of clarion call of like, what is it that I need now to do to really nourish myself and connect to myself? Same thing with the people with PCOS, same thing with people who have experienced, irregularities around their cycles. It just seems to be this mechanism to help them connect more deeply to what I really think is a sacred rhythm.
I love that. I mean, for people who don't know, people who struggle with endometriosis, I have a cousin who does, and I just felt so bad because it looks so painful and
Mhm.
awful. I have friends who have PCOS, and I know that they would just give anything for some like help during
Mhm.
like, those times. So I'm wondering what led you to want to kind of study the menstrual cycle? To me, it feels so random, like, oh, because I am lucky. I'm a woman who, like, my period's not terrible, but you
Yep.
know what? I'm lying because at one point I did have a 20-day period because I had a fibroid, and that was
Oh,
insane. Thank
yep.
God for surgery. But
Yep.
I mean, the period itself, the menstrual cycle is just like really mystical in a way. It's just like, here it is. But like, I feel like I'm kind of lucky because my cramps aren't usually that horrible. My husband will probably disagree. During my PMS phases, I'm probably more bitchy than I really realize. Like, I'm fine to me. But I feel like I'm kind of blessed. I slap on a pad and I
Mhm.
keep it moving. But I have a lot of friends. It's not the same way.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of like, talking about sexuality or STDs. It's one of those things we don't talk about as a
Mhm.
society. So I'm just like wondering what led you to kind of want to study the menstrual cycle.
So when I had my spiritual awakening in 2019, I really started to deeply connect with goddess religions, the divine feminine, and connecting to source as a female entity because I had been raised with a deeply male centered
Mhm.
religion. And that was so interesting to me. And so as I was meditating and as I would do these embodiment practices like breath work or like embodied dance, I kept hearing this like little whisper. It's like, you've got to get off birth control. If you really want to explore your divine feminine, you've got to get off birth control. And I'm like, okay. So I'd been on the pill for like 16 years at this point, deeply
Wow.
terrified of ever falling pregnant. My husband and I are child free by choice. That's a trauma response for sure. And
Mm.
so he had a vasectomy. He got a
Ah,
vasectomy in early 2020, and I came off of the pill in May of 2020. And my own drama, oh my gosh, of coming off the pill in the midst of a pandemic where you could not get into the doctors and the doctors were so overwhelmed with other things.
yeah, yeah.
That's what forced me to learn about the cycle because I needed to heal my own. So my
Interesting.
period did not come back for 8 or 9 months. I got like cystic acne. My hair started to fall out.
I mean, because 16
Um,
years of
yeah,
the hormones.
right. I had horrific mood swings. I mean, gosh, coming off of birth control in the midst of the pandemic where you're already stressed AF, like I remember flipping my shit on my
Oh my
boss several
oh,
times.
yeah.
And oh, yeah. But I was like, at this point, we're a family. I'm like, I'm coming off of the pill. I'm hormonal as fuck.
Mhm.
So I apologize.
Deal with me.
Yep. I'm your essential anchors. Ta-da. And I
And, oh,
also
yeah, by the way, I'm leaving you soon.
right? You don't know that. Neither did I. But I also had just like complete lack of libido. Complete lack of libido. And
Mm.
my genitals and my vulva were so numb. And
Mm.
so learning about the menstrual cycle in the beginning was me learning all the things. This is very much me. Intellectualize and read all the books, learn how to do it all. And I call it me masculating the menstrual cycle, trying to do it right. And
It
I
goes
mean, God,
away.
I did everything. Supplements and seed cycling and cycle syncing my
Ah.
workouts. I mean, you name it, I've read the book.
Wow.
Got the book report.
Exhausted.
So what happened is I started to realize that the most long lasting issue was this issue with libido, this disconnection from pussy, this disconnection from my vulva. And so I did some studies with a woman named Rosie Reese out of Australia who owns Yoni Pleasure Palace, which is this like crystal and glass dildo company. She had this wonderful membership called the Golden Yoni. I think it was called the Golden Yoni. So I was in that for about a year, learning about connecting to the womb, connecting to the vulva, connecting to the cervix. And through that slow awakening of my sensuality, my period finally got its shit together, started to bleed
Mm.
more regularly,
Mm.
and the other symptoms began to go away. And so all of that is to say that I started studying the menstrual cycle because of this inner voice that said, if you truly want to live full out as an authentic woman, you can't be on the pill. You have to experience what it is to live in these hormonal ebbs and flows. And for me, and again, I'm not going to say this is everyone's story because I think the pill is really important for a multitude of reasons. But for me, I needed to experience the ebbs and the flows, the highs and lows, so that I could position myself to be what I am now, someone who can help show the way.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you were meant to come off of it for a reason,
Yeah.
and it's interesting that it's like your body knew what to do. So when you met with that woman, like, were you doing certain practices? Were you doing, like, steams? Or how did your body know what to do?
That's such a fascinating question. How did my body know what to do? I had to show it. So the first thing I started to do was yoni eggs. God, this is forever. I have not talked about this in so long. I
Like,
start
dusting off the past here.
Yeah, I'm like, "Damn, what was I doing?" So I first started working with a yoni egg, and a yoni egg is a crystal egg that you place inside the vaginal canal. It has some deep roots in like ancient China. I'm not really a fan of it all the time now, just for a couple of different reasons. It's kind of a cultural appropriation situation. But what it does is it helps to rejuvenate that area of the body. The other reason that I'm not a super huge fan of it right now is because I think a lot of women have vaginal tightness and that can make it worse. But
Mm.
that was one thing I was doing. The other thing that was like deeply transformative was internal vaginal massage. And so you can do this in a variety of ways, but the way I did it and the way that I learned it from this Golden Yoni membership was to use a glass dildo wand, and they're shaped kind of like a curve with a ball at the end, and to basically give yourself internal trigger point massage while breathing deeply and while going really slowly. And
Mm.
so you think of the vulva and the vaginal canal like a clock, 12, 6, 3, 9. And you slowly and with consent from your body massage the outside at the 12, the 3, the 6, the 9, just by pressing the wand there on that space, deeply breathing, holding it for a minute or two, and then moving around. And then maybe you go and enter 2 inside the vaginal canal. Same thing, 12, 3, 6, 9, a little deeper. When I began to do this work, probably the second or third time, I am probably 2 to 3 inches inside my vaginal canal, and in the upper right quadrant, I feel this pinch, and I hear this man's voice that I dated after I got divorced in my 20s say, "You fat bitch."
Oh
Like,
my lord.
"What? I have not thought of you consciously in years, dude. Like, what is happening?" And he was there.
Oh
That,
my
like,
god.
that memory was stored there in the vaginal canal. I'm like, "Okay, shit, I'm sold." Like,
Yeah.
prove it to proof. And so it's the
Wow.
same thing as, like, if you've ever been in a massage and you've, like, started to cry or you've started to tear up, not just because it might feel painful, but, like, something feels
Mm.
it gets, like, unstuck or, like, burst from that massage. That's happened to me multiple times. Same thing with chiropractic, like, they crack your neck and you're like, "Oh, no. I remember my childhood trauma, like, my boyfriend broke up with me in 3rd grade." Whatever it is. Those are memories
There it
stored
is.
there. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And so those were 2 things that I felt really they were probably like intermediate or advanced level shit that I dove right into. That's very much
Wow.
me. It's like, let me just dive in with the whole body, 2 feet. But they were really deeply transformative. The other thing was just looking at my vulva, getting the mirror out, getting like the lights low, playing some sensual music, and actually looking at my vulva, which is, by the way, everything on the outside of your genitals, and looking at it with like a loving eye versus a judgmental eye. And thinking about
Mhm.
like the only other time that you really like splayed open like that is with a lover or at the gyno. And for me, my herpes diagnosis was because of oral sex. It's HSV1 that I test positive for. I just have those symptoms down below, which is
Mm.
kind of rare, but becoming more common. And so I had such a block around receiving pleasure that these were the tools that were really able to help me open and begin this process of receiving. Because what I'd asked mushrooms to do in the very first protocol that I did with my coach helped me become open to receiving pleasure. Well, they heard me say that and said, "Sweetheart, you can't receive shit. So you're going to have to first learn to receive, and then we'll give
Mm.
you the ability to receive pleasure later on." And so that's sort of the practices that I felt were deeply helpful for me, as well as slowly allowing myself to live in tune with my cycle in a way that felt intuitive, not doing everything right, just doing what felt right for me.
Like you were in control of your body.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because you said that you basically ask mushrooms what to do for you. Can you just speak a little bit more on just microdosing and mushrooms in general? Because I did have a previous episode with, I think you knew the person that I interviewed. Sorry, her name's escaping me at the moment, but it was just like this my first step into learning about microdosing and mushrooms because you know about magic mushrooms you hear about in college and things like that.
Right.
And of course, in a little bit, I'm going to ask you to like dispel some myths about it. But how do mushrooms work? Because
Yeah.
to me, like in college, people were just getting high. You're
Yeah.
seeing colors, you were seeing images. So it's not like something I would think of immediately to be like, I'm going to just take a bite out of this thing and, my life is going to kind of be in sync.
Yeah.
So, how does this all work?
Yeah. So the brief neuroscience behind it, we'll talk about that first because it's honestly like a 5th grade, 6th grade level. I think I'm much more on the mystical side, but the science behind it for those who need that logic is that psilocybin, which is what the active ingredient in mushrooms are, magic mushrooms, psilocybin, which becomes psilocin in the body. You don't need to remember this. It impacts your serotonin 2A receptors in the body, and those are largely in your gut, which is why I think it helps with periods, and
Mm.
in your brain. And in the brain, they're in this high level processing center called your default mode network. Now, your default mode is where you hold like your deep beliefs, your habits, your sense of self. And it's kind of like this processing center, like a computer, where its job is to get you from A to B in the shortest amount of time possible after learning the way to do the thing. And so, this is your default. Like, how are you operating on your default mode, like your subconscious? Think of it like when you first have a new job and you have to learn to get to work. What are you doing? You're probably like putting it in your Jeep, maybe following those directions every time you need to get to work for like the first couple of days. Then you kind of get it, right? Then it becomes your default mode to zone out while you drive there and suddenly, ta-da, you're in the parking lot. Like that is such a thing. that your default mode does too, right? So when you're
Mhm.
learning a new habit as a child, your default mode is very open, it's very fluid, but as you age and your brain and your body learn the way to do the things, your default mode becomes really rigid. And so you can't affirmation yourself out of it. You can't talk therapy your way out of that rigidity. And yet, what psychedelics do is they help to thaw that part of the brain so that we can turn on other parts of our brain network to make new connections, to create neuroplasticity, create changes in the brain. And so that's why therapeutically, and intentionally, little tiny doses of mushrooms can help you to move beyond habits that are blocking you. Like they help me get sober, move beyond these wounds that have been holding us back, zoom out and see why we are the way we are, because we naturally start to question the belief systems when we're more receptive and expanded consciousness into this new realm of thinking that's not as rigid. Now, I see the magic mushrooms too as these sentient beings who want to help us, who are here. They've been here for billions of years. They're the reason why our Earth finally became like fertile after we were just like this rock floating around in space. Like
Mm.
there's a bunch of stuff out there that basically shows that mushrooms like came from space, like they're from the stars.
Oh, well.
So I see them as being these sentient beings who really help us tap into our subconscious and open our awareness through, well, a couple of different things, but one being the mycelial network, which is this underground root system you can think of that connects mushrooms to the other plant life, especially in forests, right? Like they're talking to everybody because it's that unity, right? That connects us to ourself, it connects us to other people. I think that's another reason that it works so wonderfully therapeutically, because we start to see that we aren't just ourself. Like we're such an individualistic society. Self-care is really individualistic these days. But I think the true healing lies in coming back into this community aspect, connecting with other people. So that's kind of how they work, both on the science side and then the spiritual side as well. Yeah. And I think one more thing I'll just say is that, especially in my experience, when we look at things like neuroplasticity and brain rewiring and nervous system rewiring, microdosing helps you become aware. It helps you pause. And so, what we need for deep transformation is this equation where we add repetition plus attention plus intention. And
Mm.
altogether, that's how we create deep transformation. And microdosing is a wonderful catalyst to help you stay the course, to help you uncover these things. It's not a magic pill, it's not doing any work for you, but it might be helping you be more present, help you see these things that are in your awareness now. And I said I asked them, you can ask them for help in whatever element that you want, but they're not going to give you what you want. They're going to give you what you need when you allow
Mm.
them to be something that you trust, when you see yourself as someone who things happen for and not happen to.
I love that. So in your practice, that's what you do. I'm trying to kind of really understand and grasp it. Like, walk me through like a first timer, maybe working with you,
Yeah.
microdosing, like someone who knows nothing and they're just like, ultimately they want to get unstuck in life.
Yeah.
How can microdosing help them?
The first thing that I have everybody who even comes into my world do is look at my free microdosing guide. It answers all of the big questions, including the ones you're too afraid to ask.
Mm.
And that's a really great place to understand, like, how do you dose? How much are you ingesting? Where do you get them? What do you do when you finally have them? And how do you make an intention, right? So that's a really lovely free place to start.
Love
When
it.
I start working one on one with people, the first session is like a deep dive into the past, into the things holding them back, into the things that they're hoping to accomplish and receive from working with mushrooms. We'll look at their personal cycle background. I work with a lot of women who are in perimenopause and who are past bleeding age as well. And so, if you're not someone who has a womb anymore due to hysterectomy, or you're not bleeding regularly because of either your age or some type of a hormonal situation, we look at your energy audit, right? And see what you're spending a lot of time on. What do you want to move through? And then when we're actually in session, my clients will eat mushrooms, their microdose, about 30 minutes before we log on to Zoom. And then in the beginning, it's grounding. We'll do some orienting practices to help them settle into the space, settle into talking together. And then over the course of 3 months, because that's how long my one on one containers are, we will little by little go into the subconscious through visualizations and through deep meditations, assisted by the mushrooms to help them see the messages within themselves that are wanting to be seen. And so the framework sometimes looks like going into the womb, going into the feminine side of the body versus the masculine side of the body. It's very mystical. It's kind of hard to always, I mean, it's individually led. So I have a framework, but I also have no agenda. But
Mhm.
that's kind of what it looks like. It's a little talk therapy plus movement plus breath work plus deep visioning, eye mask, eye closed, while we together speak back and forth. It's not like a meditation where I just guide them. I usually guide them through a little bit of breath work to soften and to be back into the body. And then I ask them what they see. And all except one, I've had one client who was not a very visual client. And so we really worked a lot more with sensations, but all the rest of the clients and the mushrooms have guided us into images and stories. And, oh, I see, oh shit, my dad is here, or whoever's
Mhm.
here. And so that's sort of the magic of the mushrooms, is that it awakens magic in you.
It almost sounds like an ayahuasca trip, like something you'd see on TV, or, if people have heard of that practice. I'm wondering, is it scary? Like, do
Mm.
people freak out? Especially if you've never done any kind of, like, let's say, quote unquote, drugs
Right.
before. What are they to expect?
So I'm working with such tiny doses that you're never high. You might feel a little bit woozy, especially if you have never experienced this before. But I'm not going to say that it's never scary, because sometimes things do come up that feel big. And that's my job, is to hold that space for folks. But as opposed to eating a handful of mushrooms your friend gave you at the music festival and then seeing like trees with faces, like it's not the same, right? It's not an intoxicating experience where you feel unable to control your body. If you eat too much, sure. And that happens to us all, and it's a good piece of information to know this is the threshold. But our goal here is to ingest a teeny tiny amount so that you're not intoxicated, but yet you still are able to perceive that slight shift in either your bodily sensations or your mindset. A really common phrase in the microdosing world is sub-perceptual. And I don't like that phrase as a somatic psychedelic guide, because I think that when you're in tune with the body, you will be able to subtly perceive this shift. And so I always use non intoxicating. You could still drive, parent, go to work. I used to anchor the news. Like, nobody freaking knew I was microdosing in the morning and then anchoring the 5, 6, and 10.
Mm.
So the goal is never to be high. And so it's not as scary as some of those bigger doses could be.
So when you're microdosing, and like there's like that part when you're in a session, but so when you microdose, you're not always in a session, like you said, like you'd be doing the
Right.
news or whatever. Are you microdosing just to keep that like consciousness with you?
I know what you're saying. So when you're in a microdosing protocol, you're usually eating mushrooms several times a week, because this is like a gentle layering on effect of the healing. When I see people, I see them once a week for 3 months. And so, yes, when we meet in session, you're microdosing, but you're also microdosing several other times without being face to face with me on Zoom. So, yes, you can go about your everyday life. You can parent, you can drive, you can go to work. I just always ask people to spend at least 30 minutes, an hour is better, remembering that you're highly suggestible when these mushrooms are in your system. And so if what you do is pop your capsule, which microdoses often come in like little capsule form, you can also
Ah.
do it in a tea. But if you just like pop it like a pill and then go about your fucking day without intention or attention, that repetition is just going to get you straight back into wherever the fuck you've been.
So mine, it's not gonna work if you keep doing what you're doing.
No,
You're gonna keep getting what you got.
exactly.
Mhm.
Yes, you
Mhm.
have to shift, right? So you have to have the intention of seeing this as sacred medicine. And so for me, it can look like going for a walk, meditation, art, sitting out in nature, petting your dog, working out, cleaning. Like there's so many things you can do intentionally without it always looking like this deep spiritual woo-woo practice. Again, it's just about meeting this mushroom medicine
Mhm.
with the presence and respect that it deserves. Because if you
Mm.
don't, then it's never going to work for you. And that's why I
Right.
see a lot of folks who do this on their own struggle, and they're like, "Oh, it didn't work for me." Okay. And that's true for you, right? I'm a very big DIYer. I love a DIY, and I would never have DIY'd this in the beginning, because I
Mhm.
felt like I said, I had all those biases. I had these other things happening for me, and so I'm not someone that says you have to work with somebody to microdose. And if you really want true deep transformation, you probably should, at
Right.
least a little, because it's really very hard to get into your subconscious. Like you can't get into your subconscious while you're conscious. Like it's very
Right.
tricky. Like it's like you need a mirror, or you need, someone to help you hold that container. And so that's kind of why I say you have to meet it intentionally, in order
Yeah, I
to
mean, I would
have.
think it would be really important to work with somebody because even just sitting there and figuring out your intentions and
Yeah.
just knowing how to honor them daily, because like you said, you can't just like take a handful and be like, "Okie dokie, I'm just gonna go about my day." It's like if people want to get unstuck in life, you probably need to ask the certain questions to figure out what areas need to get unstuck in. How
Yeah.
are you going to live intentionally microdosing to get to your goal? I would
And that's
imagine.
Yep, and that's a great another part too that I forgot to add. In the first session that I do with clients, we do something called the somatic intention setting model, and it's something that I learned in one of my trainings from the Embody Lab, and it's by a woman named Atira Tan. And basically, it's all right. You're coming here with this idea of what you want. Let's ask the body. Let's go into the meditation. Let's see. And I'm telling you, not a single person who has come into session with, like, let's say their intention is to receive more pleasure, they never leave with that intention, because your egoic mind, your conscious mind thinks you want something, and internally in the body it knows you need something different. And so it's
Interesting.
often like the deep need to surrender, or to tap back into self-love. And there's so many different people that I've worked with who've had these just fascinating shifts, and it's just really interesting. So yeah, exactly like you said, like you need to learn how to ask the right questions, but also allow your body to speak what it wants, because it's kind of like we said before, interpret, right? Like your brain is here to interpret the things that your body is truly saying. And if you don't understand how to speak that language, then it's going to take a little bit more time, whether you're microdosing or not.
That's so fascinating to me. So you could go in literally with like what you think your
Mm.
intention, but your
Yep.
body can tell you what you really need.
Yep. And so
And
sometimes it'll be like you go in with an intention, and we ask the body, where do you feel that intention in the body? Okay, what's there with the intention? What color is it? Is there a story related to it? And it'll be like, oh shit, I see myself in third grade. I'm deeply depressed. God, am I depressed now? Wait, what's this depressed feel like in my body? Oh, this is keeping me from my purpose. What is my, it's just like this weird thing that happens.
it's so interesting.
And I also just want to say, like, there's no such thing as a right intention or a perfect intention. So don't like
Yeah.
waste your brain space thinking you have to find some perfect thing. No, like trust and surrender. If you just went into a practice with those things, like I trust, I surrender, you're going to get some deep medicine, I think. But yeah, the somatic intention setting model is really profound in that it helps to like let your body show you things you're consciously unaware of.
And I love that you work with people, women specifically, to help them figure that out and guide them through it because I mean, that's kind of difficult to figure out on your own. you
For
know?
sure. Yeah, you're never taught this.
Right, exactly. A couple of questions to go along, just random questions to go along with it. Does this help with fertility in any ways?
So, can I say definitively yes? No, I cannot say definitively yes. And there
Right.
aren't really any studies. Of course, there aren't any studies. However, I have a fabulous client case study. So, a woman came to work with me. She was in a group that I held in 2023 on cyclical microdosing. It was a group. There was 4 women in it. She came to me because she'd had a miscarriage,
Mm.
and she wanted to, connect more with her womb. She was hoping to have a baby. And in our time together, she remembered a deeply repressed sexual trauma that happened when she was a teenager. She was basically date raped.
Wow.
And it was like, fuck. I mean, this for me was like right when I was bringing this into my space. I'd been working with menstrual cycles. This was kind of the first group of psychedelics that I had, a psychedelic microdosing group that I'd held. I'd worked one on one, but never with group. And to be freaking honest, I was kind of terrified. I was like, shit, she's going to get scared off. This is
Yeah.
big. This is massive, because she's sharing this in a group. I'm like, oh my goddess. Okay. We held the space. We held the space. We moved through it. There were times when she wouldn't, I could tell it was difficult, right? I could tell that she was difficult. It was difficult for her. And so I
Mhm.
did some things to help reach out and help guide her through it. I reached out to her a couple of months ago. I'm like, hey, hadn't heard from you a while. Our thing wrapped up in like August of 2023. Girl, she got pregnant like a month later. And she has like a beautiful
Wow.
baby. And she wrote me
Wow.
this beautiful message. And she's like, I absolutely know I needed to clear my womb of that past
Mm.
trauma that I had forgotten in order to call in my soul baby that needed to come through. And here she
Wow.
has this like beautiful daughter. And I'm like, oh my goddess, you have a daughter. Like, what amazing lineage are you now passing to her, having done this work? So will it help with fertility on like a physiological level? Possibly. I mean, if that's a block, maybe. I can't say yes or no, but energetically, if you've got a block there in the womb or you have unprocessed grief, unprocessed trauma,
Mm,
because you've been in fertility treatments for a really long time, like, first of all, it's painful. Second of all, like, if you're shaming yourself because you can't do this thing that you potentially might be saying is the thing women are made for, which is
mm,
such a big shame around a lot of infertility issues. If you have had a miscarriage in the past, if you've had a traumatic birth, if you had an abortion,
mm.
all of those things are somatically memories in the body, right? They're held there in the womb space. So, yes, I absolutely believe that working somatically with the womb through microdosing as well could clear things out and potentially help people get pregnant. It certainly helped that one client.
Wow. I mean, you just never know. And why not? If that's like your path and you really want to try things out, why
Yeah.
not give it a try, you know? My next question was, does this work for everybody?
I think that it works for the folks who have a growth mindset and are the people who are willing to see themselves as no matter what's happened to them, how can I look at this from a lens of this is happening for me and not to me? So, folks who are in a victim mentality, yeah, I've had some people I've worked with. You know what? I can't even say that I've had people I've worked with. People slide into my DMs all the time who want like the free advice, who just want to know where to buy mushrooms, who I can tell from like not even really speaking that long to them, like they're in a victim mentality, they're in a state of distress. And I think you have to move beyond that. Not like you have got to be healed by any means to work with this, but you have to be open to the potential that this could be like I could have the story wrong. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like if you're really rigid and you're really stuck and you're really, you know, unwilling to have this more open and broad mindset, I don't know if it will work for you. The other thing is if you're really in survival mode, because I work with a lot of women in deep survival mode, you've got to break through that before you can get into the healing mode because you can't heal in survival. You're just trying to hold the hell on to the earth and not fall off the
Mm,
planet. You know, like
right.
so when you're in burnout, when you're in a deep stress response, this certainly can help to get you out of it. And it might take a little longer for you to get from the space of feeling deeply blocked and deeply stuck and deeply triggered into a space where you've got this open mindset because you kind of got to navigate the burnout first.
Right.
So it
That
can take
totally makes
time.
sense. Yeah.
The one last thing I will say is just the mushrooms have their own timeline. Like I said,
Mhm.
I asked in March of 2022, help me be open to receiving pleasure. A year, 18 months later, I'm on a walk and I'm like, wait, I'm like pretty orgasmic now. Holy shit. Did I finally get what I asked for? And it's just like this weird. So you kind of have to like be willing to let go of this rigid way of thinking and so that you can open up to like the abundance that they will provide for you and the people who are okay with that, okay with not knowing but okay with trusting, I think it works for sure.
It's kind of letting your body, your mind, and nature just take control. Let
Yeah.
let that have the wheel.
Yeah. And trust that you are going to get the support that you need, that you're
Mm.
and you know that the people who are here for your growth will present themselves like the teacher what is that phrase? It's like the teacher comes when the student is ready. And the teacher can be all the things. Your womb is like the top guru, by the way, smarter than any therapist. Your womb, your period, your mushrooms, whatever. They'll come whenever you're ready, but you have to be open and ready.
You have to be ready. Man, okay, so my last question, even though I have like a list full, I'm like, God, you've just given me so much to think about and so many pearls here. But this is like the most important one, I think. Psychedelic healing is so misunderstood by many people. What myths do you love busting when it comes to microdosing and plant medicine, especially for midlife women?
Well, I think we already busted a huge one is that you're high.
There
You're
you
not.
go.
You know, like
Right.
you're not high, you're not unable to function. And I think, you know, there's a group out of Colorado called Moms on Mushrooms, and they do such a good job of busting these myths. The other thing I think myth wise is we talked about like moving through this whole idea of if it's bad or if it's wrong. I think the other myth is that you should be able to just heal without it. Like, I think that that was something that for me kind of got me stuck for a while. Like, oh, well, why do I need this additional thing? How am I trying to say? What am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is sometimes we look outside of ourselves for these like ways to heal us. And sometimes we have some shame around outsourcing healing. Now, I say that with a grain of salt because I don't think microdosing is actually outsourcing anything. I think it's a deep inward turning through the partnership and allyship with a sacred medicine. And
Mm.
so, one of the myths I think is that you need this psychedelic to trip you out so that you can expand your consciousness. Not necessarily. This is just one potential modality in the ecosystem of your healing. You can never eat mushrooms and have just as much transformation through breath work, through visualizing, through connecting to your body, through sacred touch, through sensuality, through pleasure. And for me, nothing rocket shipped me into my deep healing and also a deep dark night of the soul like some mushrooms. So it's like you don't need them to heal. They're not going to heal you. They're not doing any work for you. They're just holding your hand as you walk through the door into the subconscious realm.
Something that you can't really necessarily do without them.
Right. You can certainly access those parts of yourself through holotropic breath work, like that I fall asleep in,
Yeah.
and, and some other things as well. But I guess for me, my mission is really to help women remember that they have the answers within themselves already. I think
Mm.
mushrooms are also a wonderful ally to help you remember and come back and remember that word, like coming together, knitting
Mm.
together the parts of self that have been ostracized, that have been forgotten, that have been shamed, so that you can deeply become whole. And,
It's
and
kind of
also, yeah, knowing you're already
greasing
whole.
that wheel, that memory wheel that
Yeah.
the things you've suppressed for so long that are not allowing you to be the person you should be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that. And I
Wow.
think that's probably the deepest myth. Yeah. That you're not high. Oh, you're not going to do this forever. That's the greatest
That's a
part.
good one.
Unlike SSRIs, which I was on for years, this
What are
is
those?
not medicine for depression. So
Oh.
SSRIs or SNRIs, so anxiety, depression, pharmaceutical drugs that help with mental health are often something that people are on for decades because of the
Mm.
fact that they're a band-aid over a root cause. Psychedelic medicine will, whether you want it to or not, help you get to a root cause. And so for me, I haven't sat with mushrooms on a regular basis for 18 months, almost 2 years, because of the deep healing and the awareness that they gave me to shift my brain. So when you're hearing me talk about this, the people that I work with, we work together for about 3 months. Maybe they come back through for my group. But this is not a thing you're doing daily. It's not a thing you're doing for the rest of your life. It's something that comes to you in a season of life to support you through this cycle that you're moving through. And the best part is, like, you don't need them forever.
I
And I
love
think that's
that.
wildly just liberating to say, like, I
Yes.
can connect with earth medicine to reprogram my mind, my body, my nervous system to remember parts of myself that have kept me feeling blocked and then move the hell on. And I love
Yeah.
that.
I love that too because I feel like, with pharmaceuticals, they're kind of destined, they're designed to like make you stay on them forever. And it's just really scary. So I love that something from the earth, like a
Mhm.
plant medicine, can actually just better you and help you become the person you're meant to be, help you get unstuck in life, help you discover your passions, and help you live life to its truest, most fun, best
Mhm.
way of, being.
Yeah, same.
Wow. I thank you so much, Leslie, for this really interesting, eye opening conversation. I know people here, you've piqued their curiosity. I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit more about, where to find you, your coaching, any offers that you have right now.
Yeah. Well, you can always find me on Instagram until they kick me off at Leslie Draffin. I have my own podcast called The Light Within. I've pitched the free guide. I'd love to give that to you so you can put that in your show notes. It's a
Yes.
wonderful entry into my world. It links to some other really potent practices that I use to help clients as well. No mushrooms needed on those other practices. And I
Mhm.
do have two main offers. I do one-on-one work through a program I call Unbound, and it is a 3-month deep dive for the highly self-aware woman who knows she's feeling stuck and blocked and wants to move beyond that into a place of feeling deeply excited about life, deeply into herself and to her, her passions and her creativity. It's for
Mhm.
the woman who's had some sexual trauma, whether she understands it or not. And so that's a 3-month deep dive. And then I also have, but I've just opened to the public last month, my group coaching membership. It's called the Inner Circle, much lower ticket price point. And it's 2 group coaching calls a month plus a microdose assisted ceremony. There's a wonderful foundations course in there. There's a lot of like wonderful women in there. And this is a sacred sisterhood to help you walk the journey of coming home to yourself without feeling so alone and without feeling like you, are DIYing things that might feel a little out of reach, but yet maybe you're not someone who wants to drop 3K on group on one-on-one coaching. So I have a free week trial that I can give for a show link as well for the Inner Circle.
Love
And
it.
it's like you don't have anything to lose. You can come in, take a look around, check out the course, see the folks inside, check out one of the group coaching sessions. And that's really where I'm pouring most of my energy into, because I think what I've noticed is that women heal when we are in community together. Just the vibration of multiple women being in community together is healing. And then you add in these other modalities that can be really helpful. Knowing all these other women are also into the same thing can also be really helpful. So yeah, the Inner Circle and Unbound are the two offers that I have right now.
That's fantastic. And you guys can try it for free. You got nothing to lose there. Man, this is so awesome. I'd love it if you can leave us with a mantra, a quote, or words that you live by.
I feel like I've dropped so many of those in this whole conversation.
You really have.
Yeah. You know what it is? It's you are the medicine. You are the medicine. You don't need mushrooms to be the medicine. They'll help you remember that you are. Your womb is going to help you remember that you are the medicine, but you truly are the medicine of the life that you need.
That's perfect. You are the medicine, people. Leslie, you are a wonderful being. I am so thankful for you for being so open and honest and just giving my listeners tips and advice and busting myths and telling us about things that we really just don't know about. Like, you've definitely opened my eyes and shine light on some things about psychedelics I never really even thought about. I'm really intrigued by this, so I'm definitely going to be picking up those free things and hopefully even working with you, just because I'm just really interested. So thank you. Keep doing what you're doing, and, we appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
All right, guys, this is Beverly Explains It All. Bye.